In Banjo Kazooie, for about 90% of the game, you complete the game on foot. It's only when a flight pad is available can you take to the sky and fly with Kazooie. But what if we could fly anywhere we want? I mean, we all know Kazooie's lazy and could easily do it. Well, with the use of a cheat, we can do just that. Fly from any spot in any area. We can also give ourselves infinite red feathers so we can constantly fly. And it got me wondering, could we beat Banjo Kazooie if we're constantly flying and without touching the ground? And by that, I mean landing on the ground with our feet. Could we collect the notes and jiggies needed to get to the end of the game and defeat Grunty this way? Well, that's exactly what we're going to find out in this video. First, let's establish the rules. The most important rule is we can't touch the ground. Alright, well, I guess the video's over. I'm sure some of you will say that, but for this challenge, I'm not going to count when the game forces us to be on the ground. Like when we learn a new move from bottles, complete a puzzle to unlock a level, open a note door, or when entering an area. If we can fly out of an area, then why can't we fly into an area? Next, we need to establish what is considered ground. Like, if we land on the roof of these huts, is that considered touching the ground? Is landing on a tree considered touching the ground? Well, to avoid any gray areas, I've ruled everything that we can land on as ground. And finally, swimming. Obviously, swimming is not considered touching the ground as it's water. The only issue is, we can only take flight when standing on the ground. We can just save and quit after swimming, which respawns us walking into Grunty's lair, which, per the rules, does not count as touching the ground. So, to save on time from doing this, I did not count stepping on land for the sole purpose of taking flight again as touching ground. Now that the rules are established, let's get flying. From Banjo's house, we can fly straight to Grunty's lair and easily pick up our first Jiggy. I say easily because the Jiggy is just lying here, but it does require good timing and careful A-taps to snag the Jiggy without accidentally landing on the ground. We can then fly into Mumbo's mountain after unlocking it. As you'd expect, Mumbo's mountain is pretty easy for this challenge, as there are 4 Jiggies just lying around that we can grab without touching the ground. The one here on the mountainside, the one in this area, the one on top of the termite hill, and the one in the eye of Mumbo's house. We're also able to collect the Jiggy from having Conga throw oranges at these switches, as all we need to do is fly around them to have Conga hit them. Unfortunately, the other 5 Jiggies we can't collect, as they all involve touching the ground, either to fire eggs or to bring Chippy his precious orange. I was hopeful we could collect the Jiggy from collecting the 5 Jinjos, but the one Jinjo is hidden in this hut that we would need to destroy with a beak bust. Now, beak busting is fine as it's not landing on the ground, it's just Kazooie's beak hitting the ground. But after using beak bust, we do land on the ground, and we just can't be doing that, and so we can't collect the last Jinjo. That also means we can't collect the Jiggy from breaking all the huts. But 5 Jiggies isn't too bad. I should also mention the notes. These are by far the most annoying to collect in this challenge, as there are 100 of them in each level, and they are very tricky to collect without accidentally landing on the ground. But with enough patience and finesse, the majority of the notes can be collected. It was really just the notes in the termite hill and Mumbo's house I couldn't get. Next is Treasure Trove Cove. Unlocking this level means using 2 Jiggies to complete the level's puzzle. But given we were only able to collect 5 Jiggies in Mumbo's mountain, the easiest level of them all, I was concerned we'd only be collecting less and less as we progress through the game, making these Jiggies even more valuable. Luckily, we don't have to unlock Treasure Trove Cove to enter it. If you didn't already know, most of the ceilings in Grunty's lair don't have collision, or in some areas, there is no ceiling at all. These are typically areas where the game's developers never intended for us to fly, like the Treasure Trove Cove lobby. The level's loading zone is inside this chest, that we would need to jump into after unlocking the level. But instead, we can fly up and through the ceiling out of bounds, and then fly down below the ground and up into the chest and the level's loading zone from below. Treasure Trove Cove is another easy level for this challenge, and just like Mumbo's mountain, it has 4 Jiggies just lying around that we can grab. The Jiggy in this alcove, the Jiggy in this other alcove, the Jiggy on top of the lighthouse, and the Jiggy in this evil chest. This one's a bit harder to collect, but still relatively simple. We can also grab the Jiggy in this pond. And this time, we can also collect the Jiggy from collecting the Jinjos, for a total of 6 Jiggies. Most of the notes can also be collected, it's really just the ones in the sandcastle and Nipper shell we can't collect, as those would involve landing on the ground to either attack Nipper or shit eggs into a bucket. On to Clanker's Cavern, which we also don't have to unlock to enter. Instead, we can simply fly up and over this wall and then fly down into the level's loading zone. This level has a lot of water, which usually most people find annoying, but for this challenge, it's great. We can easily swim down and free Clanker, which gives us a Jiggy. We can also collect the Jiggy in this long underwater tunnel. There's also these 2 Jiggies trapped behind gates that we would normally have to shoot with eggs or peck to open. But there's no ceiling in Clanker's Cavern, so we can just fly out of bounds and grab these Jiggies from behind without having to open the gates. There's also 2 Jiggies inside of Clanker. To get inside Clanker, we can either enter through his gills
or his blowhole.
Typically, we'd use the Golden Wing, a move that keeps us immune from damage, so we can get past these razor-sharp saws. But we can actually fly past all these saws to grab the Jiggies, either through perfect timing or sheer luck. And then we can also grab the Jiggy from collecting the Jinjos. For the orange Jinjo, we'd typically have to beak bust through this grate to collect it inside the pipe, but we can just fly into the pipe from the other side to grab it. The only Jiggies we can't collect are the one from shooting Clanker's gold teeth, the one from killing all these crabs, and the one from going through all these hoops, as it requires getting on these crates to fly again. While we are allowed to touch the ground for the purpose of taking flight again, if I was to save and quit and come back, there would be no progress made, like if we collected a Jiggy in water or how we just freed Clanker, and so we can't count this one. Between the first 3 levels, we're able to collect enough notes to unlock the 180 note door and move on to the next area of Grunty's lair. The next level is Bubblegloop Swamp, but I already know we can't collect any Jiggies in this level without touching the ground in some capacity, but we can at least collect notes. The next note door is the 260 note door, which we currently don't have enough notes to unlock. The good thing is, we can completely skip unlocking this note door, as there's no collision on the ceiling in this area, so we can just fly out of bounds and into the loading zone leading to the next area. But like pretty much every level in the game, we can get into Bubblegloop Swamp without unlocking it, so we might as well see what we can collect there. In the levels lobby, we can once again fly out of bounds at the ceiling. The levels loading zone is in this hut, so we need to reach it from below. And this was tricky to do. Once we fly below the lobby, we're pretty much blind, and timing when to fly up into the hut was surprisingly difficult. And often when I did get into the hut, I'd miss the loading zone and clip back inbounds. But after about 20 minutes, I finally hit the loading zone to Bubblegloop Swamp. And just as I predicted, we can't collect any Jiggies in this level, as we would need to be on the ground to collect them all. Either to hit switches, attack frogs, break down huts, or to abuse Tank Tup. For a minute, I did think we could collect the Jiggy from the Jinjos, but then there's this Jinjo underneath this platform that we're supposed to collect as the crocodile transformation. If we come back to the level after learning Beak Bomb, a move that propels us through the air at high speeds, then we can grab the Jinjo, but then we'd land in the swamp. An argument could be made that this isn't touching the ground, but unlike when we're swimming, we are standing, so I couldn't in good faith count this Jiggy. Next is Freezeasy Peak, and like Bubblegloop Swamp, we can enter the level's loading zone from the below. The only thing is, to clip out of bounds, we need to use Beak Bomb, and this move is learned in the level. So we did have to complete the level's puzzle to open it, which required 8 Jiggies. Freezeasy Peak, we can collect 3 Jiggies without touching the ground. The Jiggy from beak bombing the giant snowman's buttons, the Jiggy from beak bombing and killing all these evil snowmen, and the Jiggy inside the giant snowman's pipe, which we can also beak bomb into to collect. Every other Jiggy involves touching the ground, but 3 Jiggies is definitely an improvement from 0 Jiggies. Next up is Gobi's Valley. The level's entrance is this palm tree, which if you didn't know, has a small hole at the top between the palms that we can beak bust through to enter. And in Gobi's Valley, there's 4 Jiggies we can collect without touching the ground. The Jiggy from flying through these rings, the Jiggy from Grabba, which we're supposed to use the running shoes to grab, but can grab with a well-timed beak bomb. The Jiggy from freeing Gobi, which we're supposed to beak bust on this little hill of dirt to do, but we can once again beak bomb to break this hill instead. The distance of where we beak bomb was also important. If we're too close to where the Jiggy spawns, Banjo grabs the Jiggy and lands on the ground. But if we beak bomb and stop in a specific spot, Gobi will hit us away from the Jiggy and prevent us from grabbing it and landing on the ground, allowing us to grab it while flying. And then finally, we can also grab the Jiggy inside the water temple. For whatever reason, we can push this button, which opens up the temple without touching the ground. We're supposed to use the running shoes to step on this button and then run up to the top of the temple to get inside. But we can push it while flying. We can just simply tap the button while flying like so, and then fly up and into the temple, where we land in a body of water, allowing us to grab this Jiggy. I also forgot we can grab the Jiggy in this temple, where all we have to do is beak bomb the Kazooie target to enter, and then fly up to grab the Jiggy. So it's actually 5 Jiggies we can collect in Gobi's Valley. I was hoping we could also collect the Jiggy from beak busting on Gobi to water the tree. If we were to beak bust on Gobi, and then immediately land in the water, we'd be good. But it seems the game is programmed to always have Banjo land in this spot on the ground while the cutscene plays, so we can't collect the Jiggy. At this point, we've been able to collect enough notes to unlock the 350 note door, which we don't even need to unlock since we can clip out of bounds here with Beak Bomb and fly into the surrounding area's loading zones. Past the 350 note door takes us to the next level, Mad Monster Mansion. And just like Gobi's Valley, there's also randomly a hole at the top of the level's entrance that we can beak bust through. Who knew? In Mad Monster Mansion, we can collect 3 Jiggies without touching the ground. We can of course collect the Jiggy at the top of the church, the Jiggy in the water well, and the Jiggy in the mansion that we can get into through the chimney. All the other Jiggies require breaking doors or windows, which we can't do with Beak Bomb. But somehow it makes sense that we can break them with eggs. The next area in Grunty's lair we need to head to is the water level raising area, which again has a note door we can skip. This room connects to the lobby of Rusty Bucket Bay, but to reach the level itself, we would need to transform into the pumpkin in Mad Monster Mansion and raise the water from in the crypt. But since we can fly, we can skip all that and hit the switch here, which normally to reach also requires raising the water. We can do what I want to do in Gobi's Valley, and that's Beak Bust on the switch and then immediately land in the rising water so that we don't land on the ground. The only problem is we need to be on the ground in the next room to fly and get into Rusty Bucket Bay. We can easily clip at a bounce here and fly into the level's loading zone, but if I was to save and quit, the water level would be back to where it started, and so per the rules, getting into Rusty Bucket Bay would require touching ground. The only Jiggy I think we could even get in this level is the one on the ship's exhaust stack. So that leaves the last world, Click Clock Wood. Typically, we'd need 650 notes to get into the level's lobby, but since we're flying, we can enter the lobby from this higher entrance instead. It was at this point in the challenge I needed some help. Getting into Click Clock Wood normally would require hitting the switch, which is touching the ground. And because we can come into this lobby as the bee transformation and fly, this is one of the few rooms in the game that actually has a ceiling, since the developers intended for us to be able to fly in this room. But I knew from previous Banjo Kazooie videos I did that we can skip past the 765 note door as the bee, so I figured we could probably do it as Banjo Kazooie too. It really was the only option at this point, as I definitely don't have anywhere near 765 notes to open the door. But to confirm it was possible, I reached out to TSR Stormed, one of the biggest players in the Banjo Kazooie community. If it was possible, he would know. And it turns out, yes, we can skip past the 765 note door flying as Banjo and Kazooie. However, we can only do this on the PAL version of the game. The game has a feature called lag compensation, where if the game is at a lower frame rate than 30 frames per second, it will increase the game speed by 1.5 to compensate for the slowdown in gameplay. And since the PAL version is clocked to 25 frames per second, Banjo will automatically be at a faster speed than he normally is. And this faster speed means we can clip out of bounds here using Beak Bomb and without lag. Clipping out of bounds here on the North American version would require lag, but when TSR tried the skip, he was only able to pull it off in the PAL version. What's also unique, and I'd say painful about the PAL version, is for some reason you're not allowed to skip the opening cutscene. And if we clip out of bounds here, that also means we can now enter Click Clock Wood from below. I'll just go ahead and say it now, but we don't actually need to collect any more Jiggies. But since we're here, let's see what we can collect. Click Clock Wood is separated into 4 areas, which are defined by the different seasons. Accessing each world would mean beak busting on a switch, but by clipping out of bounds here using Beak Bomb, we can access each area without having to beak bust to unlock them. The general rule of thumb on the PAL version is that if there's a 90-ish degree wall and floor, you can clip through it. And for the Jiggies, we can collect 2. We can collect the Jiggy at the highest platform on the giant tree, and the Jiggy in the treehouse. I forgot about this Jiggy, so make that 3 Jiggies we can collect. Every other Jiggy would involve touching the ground. I'm thinking it might also be possible to collect the Jiggy in this house if we can clip through it, but I had been playing on the North American version the entire challenge, before learning clipping out of bounds is easier on the PAL version, so I wasn't able to test this myself. With all the levels that we could enter completed, the only thing standing between us and the end of the game was Grunty. The 765 note door leads to this room with a teleportation pad that takes us to Grunty's Furnace Fun, and the only way to activate it is unfortunately by standing on it. I was hoping we could clip out of bounds in this area and possibly trigger the loading zone from underneath, but it's not possible to clip out of bounds here due to the fixed camera. But if we beak bomb into the warp pad, we fall flat on our face and warp, and technically we didn't land on our feet. Grunty's Furnace Fun is a game show hosted by Grunty herself that we're forced to play before actually fighting her. We typically have to make our way to the end of the board, activating either a question or challenge as we step on each floor panel. Beating Grunty's Furnace Fun also triggers the fake end credits. So I assumed the loading zone into the next area wouldn't be activated unless we beat the game show. But surprisingly, we can just completely fly past the board and into the next area without participating at all, which also means skipping the fake end credits. There are some invisible walls lower towards the board, which I'm assuming are there to prevent us from jumping long distances to other panels, but they don't go that high. Now we're at the 810 note door, the final note door before Grunty. We definitely don't have the 810 notes needed to unlock the door, and we don't need to, because yes, we can skip this door by clipping out of bounds here with Beak Bomb. And once we're out of bounds, we can just fly straight to the final room with Dinkpot that shoots us up to the fight against Grunty, bypassing the need to complete Grunty's puzzle that unlocks the door leading to this room, which would require 25 Jiggies. This is why I mentioned we didn't need to collect any more Jiggies in Click Clock Wood. And I didn't realize it at the time when I was doing this challenge, but we didn't need to collect any more Jiggies as early as after Treasure Trove Cove. That's because we only needed 9 Jiggies to complete this challenge. The 1 Jiggy to unlock Mumbo's Mountain, and 8 more Jiggies to unlock Freezeasy Peak, which is where we learn Beak Bomb. Between Mumbo's Mountain and Treasure Trove Cove, we already had 11 Jiggies. All the other levels we can get into without unlocking, either from out of bounds or through a small hole. And unfortunately, the ending of this challenge is very anticlimactic, as it's not possible to defeat Grunty without touching the ground. In the first phase of the fight, Grunty flies around on her broomstick until it comes to a brief halt. That's our chance to attack, but the only attack we have available to us while flying, Beak Bomb, does no damage to Grunty. We just bounce right off her and take damage. The only way we can damage Grunty here is by firing eggs or pecking her, both of which involve standing on the ground. It's only in the next phase, when the flight pad is available, does Beak Bomb do damage. But even if Beak Bomb could do damage during the first phase, the last phase requires us to shoot eggs into the 5 Jinjo statues. And that's definitely something we can't do while flying, at least not in Banjo Kazooie. So no, we cannot beat Banjo Kazooie without touching the ground. But we can make it all the way to the end, thanks to there being barely any ceilings or collision in the game, which is still pretty cool. This video is dedicated to our YouTube members and Patreons. David Baden, Charm City Gamer, Bone Trooper Wheeler, Serena Bliss, Nice Gamer Music, Young Smoky VP17, Real Backfish, Rebecca Lyons, Venus Lazuli, Leburb, Puddles Megan, Boykoi13, Anarchist Kale, and Blue Pikmin is the best Pikmin, and if you say otherwise, then Louie will eat your soul. Also, this is a completely real name.